offered a job with an attractive salary in the healthcare industry, just as we began to think about a future that would include college tuition. Although it meant moving off of the farm, he took the job. And for the first time since the boys were born, I was faced with the prospect of finding both a house and gainful employment. We knew we wanted to stay in the same small town our boys had been born in. There was much to recommend it. It was small and safe, and the schools were excellent. It was the kind of community that still hosted potluck dinners, Sunday afternoon baseball games, and town picnics in the park. It just felt like home. The late 80s saw the tail end of the real estate boom. There was little suburban housing to be found in our price range. We ended up paying too much for a place that was far too big and run down for a middle-aged couple with 3 kids. It was a drafty old barn of a place, decorated in a 60s version of bad taste. Everything was painted a hideous chocolate brown, except the bathroom. For some inexplicable reason, the walls in there had been shingled. The plumber we called refused to touch the pipes, although he did spend a profitable half hour in the cellar, shaking his head and muttering. When the electrician and heating contractor had the same reaction to the wiring in the furnace, we began to worry that our original renovation estimates were off by several years and more money than we cared to think about. Still, there was enough land for a garden, and we set to work with more enthusiasm than good sense. Finding a job proved to be easier than I expected. I had taken enough courses in early childhood education over the years to apply for my certificate to teach, and quickly landed a job working with at-risk 4-year-olds in a local Head Start program. Working in Head Start was an eye-opening experience. The Head Start kids were not the carefree, well-tended children I was accustomed to. 6 of the 18 children in the program lived in foster homes. Many had been exposed to violence far beyond anything in my experience. Some were tough, some were wary, but each managed to touch me in a way that was both intoxicating and unexpected. I found myself intrigued by the foster families. Some were very good, some frighteningly bad. Money and education had nothing to do with how loving and responsive the family was. Some of the really good homes teetered on the very edge of poverty. But they had an intangible something in common, an aura of openness and warmth that drew me as surely as it drew the children. For the first time, I felt a stir of a calling. I wondered if this was who I was, or who I could be. My own family has a long history of social service. Some of my earliest memories involve finding an extra person or two, and sometimes entire families, sitting at the dinner table. Both of my parents had a habit of bringing home folks who were a bit down on their luck for a meal and a safe place to sleep. In the early 1960s, when it was still common practice to disown daughters who found themselves pregnant without the benefit of marriage, my parents opened their doors to several single, soon-to-be mothers. Their legacy of service was passed on to all 4 of their children. Given that history, it was no surprise that I found myself drawn to the foster children in my program. One child in particular spoke to me. Angelica was as different from my sons as it was possible to be. Whereas they were fair and lanky, Mayflower roots clear in every facial plane, Angelica was a Latino beauty, dark and sturdy, with an air of self-reliance unusual in one so young. Her foster home had little to offer her. Angie, in her foster parents' opinion, was a troublemaker, and not at all interested in changing her street-smart behavior in order to fit in. Toward the end of the school year, it became clear that her behavior in her foster home had deteriorated to the point that continued placement there was in no one's best interest. Bruce and I discussed her predicament many nights as we watched our 3 happy, secure boys play ball in the backyard. Bruce, of course, had never